put that up there to make me nervous. I mean, I made it just in time.
Oh yeah.
Jit mode.
Oh, I'm here. I'm hearing you double because I had the YouTube stream open on another tab.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that'll mess with you.
yeah, I'm gonna post in our Discord that we're live, but yeah, I'm excited. We'll see who's here and everything.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Good morning. Let's see.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Got a bunch of folks.
Holy moly. Yeah, tons of people. So, you know, welcome everybody. Like we were just kind of talking and have been talking about doing this for a long time. Like we'll just do some office hours that people could show up to and ask questions about, building products or whatever in Rails. And we've been doing that for years, and I feel like that's an exciting piece of what brought us. I definitely remember like learning about the Rails community and it being focused around startups and empowering like small teams to go build companies and stuff, and it's always been appealing to me. So we thought, we'll do some office hours and try and make this like a regular thing to help answer questions or whatever that people have building stuff, because man, there's you got to go start your company, you got to start your business bank account, get your EIN, you got to get sales tax figured out, you've got like customer support and all these other things just on top of like actually building your product. So Colin, the fun that we've had this past year, like digging into sales tax and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's a joyous occasion.
Right. Yeah, it feels kind of wild because you're like, oh, I want to go build a business, but the amount of like non-code things on top of what you have to do is also like surprising. But welcome everybody. Lots of people in the chat. Pretty much if you want to like ask a question or whatever, like either drop it in the YouTube comments and chat and our Discord as well if you want. And we can just kind of like start answering questions, whatever people have. Post a link to our Discord if you're not in there. That's in the chat, so you can join us. But yeah, what are you guys working on? Like, do you have a product that you've already launched or started with Rails? Are you like working on an idea or have an idea in mind but haven't started it yet? Love to hear like where you're at and all that. So let us know in the chat.
There's definitely a few in there. I just scrolling through and seeing some of the names. I can like, I know they're working on this app.
Yeah, there's lots of friendly faces.
Yeah. Oh, and I guess are we gonna do so you can like ask a question in the chat, or if you want to like join in video wise, ask? Are we doing that or just keeping it?
Yeah, we can have a couple people on the stream. So like we'll have to invite you or whatever. But if you want to like ask a question on video, let us know and we can invite you. But Devin, Rails is great for building startups once you have an idea, but I wonder if you have tips, recommendations for getting an idea validated. That's a really good one. A lot of people have various advice on this. For me, like I had to kind of go build a prototype of stuff and then actually put it out there for sale to really validate it. Like, for example, with when I launched Hatchbox initially, like everybody's like, "Oh, you got to do a trial without a credit card, like a free trial without a card, and whatever." But I really wanted to validate, are people willing to pay for this? So like I built the product and had a very simple version of it, and then like required a credit card just to even register, because I didn't even want to bother with people who weren't serious about actually paying for deploying their apps. So I would look at it that way. Like, what are you trying to validate? Probably you're trying to validate, will people pay for this thing? So if you can figure out like, how do we do a pre-sale or something, maybe you could do, like, if you're launching a course, maybe you can announce the course, talk about what you're going to cover in it, and then have like a pre-sale and say, like, if you pay $50 now, you'll get it for half price or something, and see if people are actually willing to pay for it as soon as possible. Because to me, when I'm building a business, that's the main thing I'm trying to figure out: will people pay for this? um, the other way you could go about it is, if you want to make sure that you're building something really valuable to people, and you're not worried about making money right away, you can go build it and effectively like consult for people. Um, so you could basically like treat it as, hey, I'm going to do whatever these people need and make sure that I can build a product that, you can see my cat running around in the background. um, but I always thought that was another good approach. If you could build something and see if you can make it where those people can't live without it. So like you build a product, Intercom's a good example of that. Like Intercom was building, I forget the name of their error monitoring service. But before it was Intercom, they were building this product that was like an error monitoring thing, and they needed to talk to their customers. So they built Intercom as a feature of their service. And then all these customers of theirs were like, hey, what is that? And then they started to see that like interest. And then, if they extract that and build it into its own product, they can see like these people really badly want that. And then they also can't live without it. So that is some thoughts on how to validate things. You either want to make it something they can't live without, because then you can probably charge them for that in the future, or build something and just try and sell it as soon as possible. So yeah. I'm going through some of these other comments here. Raja already built a product with Rails. Julian, one launch project and 2 in development. I'm a busy man. Robert Travis Pierre says, if you were starting right now from scratch, how would you approach the process? Tech stack, sequence, etc. That's a really good question. I guess it depends on the product a bit, like we were just talking about. Like, what are we trying to validate as soon as possible? But in general, I would stick to the Ruby on Rails stack, because we can go build stuff really fast and kind of focus on like, what's the actual business features that we're trying to build. But I would try to, as soon as possible, get it in the hands of other people, and get them using it every day. And if you can make it stick, then you're going to end up in a better place. So the sort of sequence would be like, if it's something I'm going to use, build it for myself, make sure it's functional, then give it to some friends and see if I can get them to like use it every day and rely on it. If that's possible, then like you're going to get lots of feedback. And cat
I could hear he
power
found one of those
cables.
little balls with the bells in it too. It sounded like.
Yeah. So yeah, I would spend a lot of time talking to people as much as you can. Don't try and sell your product, but like ask people about what are they doing, what are their goals, and like what are they just having trouble with, and try and treat it as like, hey, I imagine I'm a consultant for you, and trying to help you succeed with your business. Maybe I can automate some of those things into the product idea I had or whatever. So that's kind of like the approach that I would try to start with. And it's not like super specific on exactly what to do, but go find some people, make friends with them, try to treat it as you're consulting, and then what you build into a product that you can actually like repeat and give to somebody else. And then don't worry too much about, maybe you're going to build a couple of features that are only that customer would use. Try to avoid those, but if you've got to do that to get some of these early users, you might discover that, hey, this thing we built for them is actually the real core of the product, not what we thought we were trying to do. So you'll be surprised with a lot of those things too. Um, so learning Rails for my new job, that's exciting. Dylan says, love to learn what is the best way to get unstuck and level up as a solo developer. That's a good one. You got any thoughts on that one, Colin?
Yeah, I would say maybe trying to just like, I feel like people probably say this a lot, but try and break it down into really small chunks to get you like just working through one wall, one small, like get over a little fence instead of trying to plow through a wall. Right.
Yep. Yep.
And then I think like the biggest thing, I mean, like I shared this with you. I think I shared it on Twitter too, that I picked up in the last year is just like diving in and reading through source code, more so as like a first mechanism of trying to debug something. I think you'll learn a
Yeah.
lot like about like Ruby and Rails itself by seeing how other people are approaching problems, going nuts back there. But yeah, I would say that's a good one for sure.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be my advice too. Like, yesterday we were working on mail previews for the PageM, and like I couldn't figure out uh, the dummy app was running in the Rails test environment, and I
Right.
realized, oh, those aren't available. The mailer previews are only available in development. So instead of like figuring out how are we going to do this, or I got to build a separate app or something and run it in development just for these mailer previews, just open up the Rails source code, open up the action mailer Rails rail tie, and found the config options in there, and you copy paste those into your gem dummy app, and voila, you have it in the test environment. And that stuff's like, I googled it, no documentation, but that's okay because you can just go find it yourself. So I
Yeah.
think that really, 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 really helps to keep getting yourself from being stuck. And then as a solo developer, you don't have to rely on other people as much. If you're like, oh, I'll just go read the source code of Rails and figure out how it's working or whatever. Same thing when you see like a
Mhm.
stack trace, like
That was gonna be the other thing I said, like read logs for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like the stack trace shows you exactly what methods are being called. So like just read the source code of the stuff that happened before and after your call that crashed or whatever, and you'll get an idea of how things work internally, which really helps you save a lot of time like debugging things and keep moving forward. So yeah. And then of course obviously join like the Go Rails Discord so you can ask for help from other people and stuff. So find a good community like that, and it will save you a ton of time. John Chambers said he's working on job boards and marketplaces. Both great things to be in. Florian says working on a new Rails app inside my company. Also working on a side project in my spare time that I'd like to turn into a business eventually. That's exciting. I feel like not a lot of times do you have new Rails apps and companies. Like most of the things are existing stuff you've got to maintain, and so that is exciting. Is Rails really compatible for a solo developer? I think the answer is definitely yes, because
Final answer. Yeah.
Yeah. You've seen like GitHub and Shopify and Airbnb and even Twitter and whatever. All of those started with one, two, three developers working on some idea. And I think the thing that's nice about Rails is it's like, hey, as long as you follow these rules and stuff, like we can focus on building the product and not worry so much about like, you know, do we have the correct modules loaded and configuration and all of that stuff. It's kind of, hey, let's just get started and go build that product idea. So I would say absolutely. And especially with Hotwire and stuff, now you can even go to building hybrid native iOS and Turbo, yeah, iOS and Android apps with Turbo. So it's pretty sweet. Um, Robert has an ebook in progress and want to both sell it and have a site to provide upsell resources and community. That sounds like you want to be using Podia because they offer all of that stuff and you don't have to build any of it. And you can focus on, selling the stuff and interacting with the community. So yeah, that Podia is kind of perfect for that stuff. Duncan's looking for co-founders. If you have any recommendations on where to look, that is a great question. I really never had success finding co-founders and had to just kind of start myself and go from there. But probably Hacker News, Reddit, Indie Hackers, who knows? A lot of it's probably just making relationships in whatever community and finding people and just chatting with them and seeing who you can relate to and whatever.
Yeah, I don't have firsthand experience with this, but if you're gonna do that, I feel like it's probably a good idea to like get some stuff in writing between the
Yes.
founders.
Yeah.
Something to be aware of.
Yeah, and probably some good advice there too is like get it in writing, but also you can put a, what do they call it, the cliff or whatever. So it's like you vest your time, but you don't get anything after until the first year or something. So like,
Sure.
if you're picking up a co-founder and it's your business idea and a lot of your direction and stuff, and you're trying to find a marketer or somebody, like it probably is good to even have them. And normally you would do this with employees, but even with a co-founder or something, it's not a bad thing. Just to make sure that they're in it for the long run and stuff with you. So, John asked about using Stripe Terminal with Jumpstart. I have not actually ever used Stripe Terminal, but that's the little credit card reader that you get in a physical device, and you can use that to collect payments and stuff, and it integrates straight with your Stripe account. I do know that friend Taylor, who's working on Open Unit, is using that for collecting payments for like storage units, which is super cool. I've never used it though, so I couldn't really tell you on that one. But in theory, like I think those payments are going to go straight to Stripe or something. So I would assume that you can, you know, record those with webhooks and save it in the PageM models and stuff. And I guess you would have to figure out, I don't know, if it collects their email address, because it's generally, you want to attach it to the customer. So probably it's a similar thing, but I don't know if all those charges would be kind of like guest charges, not attached to a customer. Good
Right,
question.
like a one-time charge kind of thing or something.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess they would all probably be one-time charges, but then like,
Yeah.
are they going to type their email address on the little pin pad
And
or
you gotta
something?
do like on the old texting on the phones where you had to do like, three
Right.
eights to get a T or whatever it is.
And maybe they have some sort of integration with the web, so maybe you can like have the website like trigger the device to be like
Mm.
connected to the right customer or something. I'm not sure. That's a fun one. I'll have to look into that sometime. I know you could buy the little device and they'll ship it to you, and you get like actual physical test cards that you can swipe,
Ooh,
which
that's
is,
fun.
that would be fun just to have. So um I was gonna look at our Discord questions real quick too while we're here.
Mm.
You said, as you mentioned, the hardest thing for me when building a product was not actually writing the code, but the taxation bit. I had to pause signups for my Scattergun app because my new accountant is not comfortable working with me until I move to a merchant of record because of EU VAT. Yeah, that is not super fun. And honestly, like Stripe can help with all that stuff. Like it can handle that through Stripe Tax, including EU VAT and stuff. But what's super nice is if you use Paddle or some of the other alternatives that actually are the merchant of record, the customers pay Paddle instead of you, and then Paddle just pays out to you. And so Paddle takes care of filing the taxes, like remitting stuff and all of that for you, which is like really nice because then you're not required to handle any of that. So yeah, that is something that is certainly nice to do. I know that like Adam Wathen from Tailwind CSS uses Paddle for checkout because they're in Canada and he didn't want to deal with any of that stuff. He wants to go build his product and build his business, not deal with sales tax and things. So I can certainly relate to that because, yeah, there are lots of complexities to it. And I think a lot of times, like small businesses, like startups and stuff, just kind of do things wrong. And then you just kind of have to wait until like maybe this country or the state or something is going to like send you a tax bill and say, hey, you owe us taxes. And that's a lot of times what I've heard is people just ignore it, which isn't great to do, but they do because it's so complicated and they don't know how to do it right. You can never even launch your business and make any money if you're trying to be perfect with all of it. So it's tricky, but I think using a merchant of record service probably is pretty darn smart for saving a bunch of time on that stuff. So what else here in Discord? Use Stripe and they notify me when my income levels reach the threshold. Yep. But they don't file taxes or anything for you. They have acquired TaxJar, which can help, but that also doesn't handle anything in the EU. So you have to have another service for that. And yeah, still doesn't like, it's not perfect, but it does help in the US a lot, at least. So yeah, I'm assuming since they acquired TaxJar and stuff, the end goal is to make all this stuff automatic for you, but that's a big challenge. So yeah, luckily, like for me in Missouri, they don't actually charge sales tax for online sales. So I've been able to not have to deal with it for this whole time, which, oh, thank you. So yeah, I think it's just a tough problem. But Becky asks, any guidance on making sure that we are maintaining good security through our app throughout the development lifecycle? That's a great question. I would just use like, we had conversations yesterday about this, but like one of the nice things about using a gem like Devise for your authentication is so many people are using that. So when there's a security issue, you just update Devise and voila, it's fixed. I would be careful to write a lot of tests for, making sure that, hey, I can't access these things unless I'm authenticated. You can pay for like security audits if you want. That's probably the most thorough way to keep in mind all the security things that you don't even know about. Hiring a company to do that will give you way more insights than you probably realized into like various attack vectors and stuff. But yeah, I think Brakeman and some of the other tools you can use, they're tricky to always be accurate, but if you have Brakeman running in CI, that can be really helpful just to like monitor that stuff and be very clear about, we're querying these things, or we're doing these SQL things, and Brakeman's just keeping an eye and saying, hey, looks like this could be vulnerable for SQL injection or whatever. It's probably not a bad thing to just have always running, even though it can be a little frustrating with some of the false positives or whatever that you got to just be explicit about. Or you have to configure it to say, hey, ignore this line in this file or something, because I know it's secure, but it can't really interpret it properly. So, Andrew asked about what's the best way to set up different accounts, mainly like a marketplace where you could have a seller and a buyer. I think the way we do it in Jumpstart Pro is probably the most flexible. Is kind of having a user with multiple accounts, or like you could treat them like profiles, and then on those accounts you can have like, this is my personal one, which means that it's a buyer, and then these are the seller accounts, and maybe they have two businesses or more. If you have a user model and many accounts or profiles, whatever you want to call them, then you can have flags on those to determine like which is it, and the user can switch between them in the UI, and you can do things accordingly. So one of the things we're doing in the marketplace functionality for Jumpstart Pro is you will be able to set up those users with accounts that are sellers. And then when their buyer account buys from there, we'll automatically set the Stripe account there. So when we make a payment, it will go through our Stripe account to the merchant's account. And we can take application fees if we want and whatever. But then every future payment through that marketplace account for that customer will go to the correct location. And man, there's speaking of all the tax implications, there's like 3 different ways you can kind of build a marketplace. So some of that stuff's fun, I will say. You end up on the hook for filing tax things if you are accepting the payments and doing things on behalf of the merchants. And so you can end up where you are responsible for some of those things. And then there's other situations where you can do the Stripe setup where everything happens on their Stripe account and you just made it possible, but they're responsible for refunds and whatnot. So it kind of depends. Like if you're building Etsy, customers are coming to Etsy for the storefront, but then Etsy will accept the payment and then pay out the vendors once they've shipped the products, like Amazon does. So customers are buying from Etsy, and then Etsy's the middleman. Then there are other places like Shopify where Shopify handles the payment processing, but you're not buying things from Shopify. You're buying it from the actual merchant directly, and Shopify just facilitates that. So you have to decide what kind of marketplace you actually have to figure out the right way to do that. But I think setting up in general, always having a user with separate accounts is the way to go. It'll save you a ton of time. Plus, if you were ever going to share things between other users, they just need to be a part of that account. You can decide if it's personal. You can say like, we don't allow other users to be invited to this account. But you can also then transfer a project or a product or something from one account to another one just by changing the ID, which is also nice. So yeah. And a funny story is I've heard from many people who've worked at GitHub that they have users and then they have organizations. And when they created organizations, it like inherits from user. So it's treated like a user, which seems like a very simple way to get started building teams and organizations. But they've said basically like that was just a giant mistake because teams and organizations work very different than an individual user. And so they've got kind of a mess behind the scenes that I'm sure, has grown and grown and grown and is very, very hard to refactor now and clean up. So I've heard a few people who have worked at GitHub that are like, yeah, we kind of regret that decision. Like it's one that you might make just because it seems simple at the time, but it is not a simple thing to maintain. My cat is fast. Yes, he is. And now he's probably, yep, he's in his cat tree asleep now. So used up all that energy. That's some next level green screen footage. Yes. Is there any talk about abstracting out some of the functionality of Jumpstart Pro into a gem? Yeah, in general, we try and balance that because if you extract it to a gem, it makes it very hard to like change how that works because you've got to go override things. You've got to make sure that it works properly in the Rails boot process and works with the reloader and is inherited in the right order and things like that. So in general, the approach we've taken is we'll give you the source code and you have it in the location you would have written it yourself. So it's easy to tweak and change as needed. And then it makes Git merges a little bit tougher. But at the end of the day, you're trying to build your own product. And the features that we do in Jumpstart are sort of the core features. But if you need to change that stuff, then do it. I think what we can do is basically pull out some of the views, put them in a hidden location, then you can override them one by one because that's probably where the most conflicts will be when you're trying to change the layout and the theme and stuff. So those are ones I think we can like, here, just override this completely, change your navigation layout or whatever, and it'll be a little bit less merge conflicts and stuff for that. But in general, that's the philosophy we take. We want it to feel like a Rails app that you wrote yourself. You didn't happen to write some of this code, but it's where you would expect it to be. You can change it. You own it. It's your app. We want you to build your product and we want you to feel comfortable with it. We don't want it to feel like it's all this stuff hidden away in gems and I don't understand where any of it is. That is so frustrating. And so that's like the philosophy we've taken with Jumpstart Pro. As a Node and React and Rails community enthusiast, my main struggle is to choose the stack for my apps. Just choose Rails. Yeah, I can imagine that, if you like both of those, they're very different approaches. The React stuff is going to be a lot more front-end JavaScript and things. I feel like if you're more comfortable on the back end, then Hotwire and Rails is going to be so efficient for you. It's probably more efficient than the React approach, whether it's got a Node or Rails backend. But it depends on the app too. Like if you're building Discord and you got a very interactive front end, then like Hotwire is going to be kind of a pain, and React would be a better solution for that. So probably depends on the product. But at the end of the day, just pick one and ship it, and don't evaluate both too much. Like just fight your own psychology where you want to like know that I picked the perfect thing. Just ship it, get it done. If you're more familiar with Node and React, then like use that. So if that's what you do for a living, then great, use that. That is whatever gets you to a functional product in customer hands faster. I would just use that. Mauricio asked about how do you approach integrating landing pages, blogs, etc. into the product? Build everything into the Rails app or use third-party services like Webflow, WordPress, etc. There's probably I would think about this one as, am I doing all this myself? And if so, just throw it in the Rails app and I can easily edit the HTML. I can always grab Spinna or another CMS for Rails and drop it in there, and I can make a blog and I can make landing pages and whatever else. But if you were working with other people who are not as technical, a lot of the approach you will see is have the, www or your root domain running You could have it running WordPress, Webflow, whatever it is, some marketing tool that hopefully has an easy way to edit without having to write code. Then you can run your Rails app on app.domain.com, example.com, and then your Rails app can live there. You can give free reign to your marketers to edit anything they want. They don't have to talk to you for changes. You can work on the product and they can, do that. One of the things that I've done for this with that in mind in the future is the new Hatchbox actually runs on the root domain and app.hatchbox.io. And so when you go to log in or sign up, we link you to the app subdomain so that even though the Rails app right now is running the root domain marketing pages, we can just change that out at some point and just have them linked to the app subdomain. So we're already pushing people in the right direction for that change in the future, even though we're not doing that yet. So, yeah, that's all I can think of. Colin, you have any thoughts on?
I was gonna say the same thing.
that?
If it was just myself, I'd be putting it all in the Rails app and just going monolithic. But definitely, like if I was gonna let somebody else handle like marketing stuff, use whatever you're comfortable with over there, and I'll integrate it however we need to. But yeah, just myself, I'm doing it in house, so to speak, in the Rails app.
Yeah, and I guess like Bridgetown and stuff would be good if you want to do static sites for that. But I would, if I'm thinking about the marketing site and I'm a developer, I want that stuff to be as easily changed as possible. So it either needs to live in the same Rails app or WordPress or something so that I can edit that and add a theme or something without writing any code for that. What is the status of the marketplace feature? I'm working my way to get to an Etsy style app. So I think it's basically done. I need to finish up a couple things, like when you go check out on somebody else's account that we assign their Stripe account as your Stripe account for that customer, so that it is associated with that for all payments. But for the most part, we have that working in a branch. You can check out the PR. You can merge it right now. We'll probably add some commits to that to wire up the Stripe payments. I don't think that we're going to support Paddle or Braintree marketplace functionality. Hopefully, we're going to drop Braintree in the future. It seems like PayPal's kind of trying to merge it into PayPal. I don't know. We'll see about that. But Stripe will be the only one we actually support for that, which should be fine because now they have so many like global payment methods and stuff. So we'll be revisiting that and finishing that up and merging it pretty soon. One of the other features related to that was, for example, like on Shopify, nobody is signing up as a customer for a Shopify account. They're signing up as a customer on, Movement Watches website, and they have an account they have a user account registered to like that merchant, and they would log in only on that merchant. So we've set up another thing so that, and I think it's in that PR, so that you can have like subdomains, and when you register on that subdomain, you can only log in with that account on that subdomain, and then you could have separate ones for other subdomains and accounts. So that is part of that whole marketplace thing. Miss TypeScript, like code completion in Rails. Any tips without changing IDE? I use Vim, so I don't have much code completion at all.
Yeah, same. I have a pretty strong 0% completion.
Yeah.
But I think, which I'm okay with, but isn't somebody working on a new like LSP or something?
Yeah, was it Kevin Newton or somebody?
He's working on the parser. I think Shopify though
Yeah.
is working on that. I forget what it's called. Maybe it's just Ruby LSP from them.
Yeah,
might want to check that out.
familiar.
Maybe.
And then, that is probably another thing that's somewhat more functional with types like sorbet and stuff. So, you know, I've not used that stuff yet, but I assume that that'll make it much easier. I know there's also like a bunch of little VS Code plugins you can use to
Yeah.
kind of improve some of that stuff.
Yeah.
The Vim stuff
Pretty bare
it
bones.
is what it is.
Yeah.
There are plugins, but yeah. Um, this is a good question. Is there a best approach to use Vue and React with Rails? I would suggest using a thing called inertia. Let's see if I can share my screen. Inertia. Let me pull up the website.
Be right back in 1 second.
Yes, sir. So, inertia is a project by one of the guys who works at Tailwind, and it's super cool. So it works with Rails and Laravel. And it basically, maybe how it works is a good, well, you can read this, but the concept here is that you write your controllers in Rails or Laravel, they render JSON, and the JSON is added as props to your Vue components or React components. And then they have all of the components for the page. So you kind of swap your views and Rails with your Vue components. Then your controllers just tell it, hey, we're going to render this Vue component. Here's the props for it. So effectively, you're just saying, instead of using instance variables for the ERB views or Vue components, then you just have it render a little HTML with the, here's the Vue component we want to render and the props for it. It's pretty cool. It's an alternative if you were going to not use Hotwire or something. This, I think, is what I would do, because one of the nice parts about this is you get to continue writing all of your routes with Rails and the Rails router, and you don't have to duplicate that on the JavaScript side of things. So you get the best of both worlds in a way. So that is pretty freaking cool. I think that was one of my favorite things when I was using Vue a lot more. I was like, dang, this is cool. So that is what I would say there. What else we got here? Have you thought about Jumpstart Pro extensions plugins that you or others can sell? I would love that. So yes, you know, if you want some help on and you've got a product idea for a Jumpstart Pro extension, send me an email, chris@gorails.com, and I'd be happy to help you with it. And I think in the future, we'll probably do the same thing. But also, we're probably going to include some example products that you will get with your Rails license. So like I've got a couple in mind, like for example, if you've heard of Net Promoter Scores, it's kind of just a simple rank would you recommend our business from 0 to 10? And they send you those little emails real quick every month or so. And I think what we're going to do is actually make a screencast series, build a product that does that. You'll import your customers. You will then have the emails being sent out. The customers will click that number and we'll record those results, and have an example product that you can actually check out. And you could probably launch it and sell it just by swapping the logo and the product name out and your Stripe keys or whatever. So I think it'll be a fun one to do. But yeah, if anybody wants to do a paid extension or something, like and wants some help with that, like let us know. I think that'll be awesome. How do I go about planning to build an MVP for a possible product? Also, time wise and money wise. Oh, that's good. Is it better to do part time or full time? Unless you're just have no responsibilities and some cash in the bank, I would have to do it part time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's one of those like it depends answers. Unfortunately, I think definitely on
Yeah.
like a lot of your circumstance and situation.
Yeah, and I think there's pros and cons to it. For me, thinking back to like when I launched Go Rails, I was doing everything part time, but I was also using that as a crutch because I was afraid of going to talk to people. And if I was trying to build something for realtors, like I don't hang out with realtors, so I don't want to go like cold email realtors or cold call them. And so I was using it as like a crutch. And you know I ended up realizing like I need to go sell stuff to people that I actually care about, like Rails developers. And
Mm,
that made life a lot easier because I will happily talk to Rails developers all day, every day, and it's no problem. I can help them much easier. So I would think about that aspect of it. If you have some savings and some free time, like for me, I had to burn the bridges. So I was consulting, and like I knew I was never going to get anywhere because I was using the part-time projects as a crutch like that. So I burned the bridges and I was like, if I don't figure this out in the next 9 months, I have to go get a job. And I would rather be like freelancing. Um, but I like forced myself mentally to like figure it out and make something work. And luckily it did work, but I also had run out of cash and had to get a job for a year. Um, but I would consider that. And then in general, like the MVP stuff, there's that little picture. I don't know, maybe I can pull it up. There's a picture of like your MVP should not be a car with one wheel. It should be like a skateboard and then a bicycle and then like a car and then a truck or whatever. And it should like always be functional completely and usable. It just may not be able to help as much as a truck would
sure.
or
Not as
whatever.
particularly feature complete necessarily, right? Like you don't need like
Yeah,
everything right out the gate.
right, right. Like you don't have to build everything you dreamed of, but at least you have to build one thing that's functional and valuable. Like a skateboard can get you faster from one place to another. Maybe not as fast as a bicycle and not as fast as a car.
It depends
And
too.
but
You
yeah.
might hit a rock, or you don't have the balance.
Uh-huh.
The other thing I was gonna say
So
too, actually, is like this is something I picked up from like playing drums and just like practicing that and just music in general. Like it's better to work on something a little bit every day than try and do like 8 hours on Saturday and then not touch it again until the next 8 hour session on Saturday. That's something that like I've carried over into like software development. Just trying to like work on something, even if it's just a little bit every day, so that it's more, you're getting more exposure back to it. And you're like, if you're working on a product, like you're not forgetting like where did I leave off? Because if you're not leaving yourself helpful things like on GitHub or something like that, then you're gonna burn an hour trying to figure out where you left off. Whereas if
yeah.
you do it a little bit every day, like you still have hopefully like some context there.
Yeah, because context switching is one of the easiest ways to waste a ton of time. Like if you don't touch a project for 6 months, you gotta spend a month trying to remember what all the decisions were, that why is it like this, and then where were we going with this, and that makes it tough. um what was I gonna say? There was something related to that you reminded me of. um oh, you were talking about every
Uh,
day, and
yep.
then it was something related to that. I don't know. If I think of it, I'll mention it. But man,
I'm trying to think of what
slip.
I said to get you going there, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It was something related where it was kind of like,
I can see it. It's coming.
it's
It's
on
right
the
there.
it's
I can
on the
see it.
tip of my tongue. But yeah. Um. Oh, I like the idea of making a channel in Discord for other people looking for help and co-founders and stuff. So we'll have to do that. Um. What are the challenges you faced after launching a product? Did you have to deal with any difficult client? Oh yeah, every single time there's always um, difficult clients and customers and things. And I guess like my advice there is like life's short. If people want to be difficult, they can, but for somebody else, like their money is not worth it. Just like tell them, hey, I don't think we're a good fit. You should probably go try out this other product that might be a better fit or whatever. Like, don't. Also, if you're consulting, like fire the client and give them whatever back that's necessary and stuff. But yeah, don't waste your time on those bad customers and stuff. It's not worth it. That is certainly something that I've seen so many times, and it's just not fun. So, I didn't get any croissants, and I would like some. So send them my way, but they need to
I
be not
depleted the
stale.
coffee.
I don't even
So,
drink coffee, so you can
mm,
have it. It's yours.
good because I did.
um. Oh, hey Jason, good to see you. Yes, no statute of limitations. So if you screw things up, you do it right, they'll come back for you.
Yeah,
So
Roman had a good comment too after that about just incorporating Missouri as the takeaway.
yes, go find a good state that, but you also have to make sure that you only have Nexus there or whatever, so that if you live somewhere else, you incorporate here, you're still probably liable for whatever state you live in. So, how did you decide on your initial pricing of Hatchbox? And when V2 came out, y'all changed pricing schemes pretty significantly. How did you all decide about that?
That's a good one.
I don't think we changed the pricing very significantly. The only difference that we had is there's no cap. So one of the issues with the old pricing was originally it came out, it was just meant to be very simple. So it was $15 a month flat for everything. And when people start deploying 50 apps and 25 servers, that ends up costing us more in support, and also more background workers that need to be running and things like that. So we had to add higher price points for that, just so that our time wasn't completely wasted. We looked at the initial pricing, kind of compared it to Cloud 66 and other similar companies out there. So the current pricing of the Hatchbox Classic stuff is basically like 15 a month for one server, 29 a month for two servers, and there's also a plan for 4 servers and unlimited, I think. And the unlimited one was just so that we don't have to have an infinite amount of plans going up. And also the plans turned out to be kind of a pain in the ass for customers. If you have 3 servers, you're paying for 4, and everything around servers these days is kind of like per minute or per hour or whatever. So if you spin up a server on DigitalOcean or AWS, you're only paying for what you use. If you spin it up for 5 minutes, you only pay a few cents for it. And so we wanted to also align more with that, but also the whole situation of those tiers limiting you. So when you go to edit your cluster and add 5 servers, it'd be like, hey, you're not on the right plan. You need to go upgrade your plan before you can add more servers. And it was just like a ton of friction. So for version 2, we actually reduced the price. Instead of roughly $15 a server, it's $10 a server. But then the metered billing makes it so that if you only run the server for an hour, you only pay for an hour. And if you run it for the whole month, you pay for $10, and that's it. So in theory, the pricing for the end user is basically the same. It's just now billed by the second instead. We're using the Stripe meter billing for that, and we'll probably end up extracting some of that code for recording the usage of whatever resources, and making that available to everybody else. We just needed to like have a real product to build it and go through the entire process and learn it ourselves. So we'll have that available soon, and that'll be nice. But in theory, it's going to be about the same as before, but you pay less, which is good. So yeah, we're just trying to make it more easy for customers, so you can feel free to add more servers and then shut them down. Because I guess one of the problems with using like $10 per server per month and putting it in Stripe as 10 and then a quantity, you're sort of prepaying for those servers that you use. So if you set the quantity to 5, it'll charge you $50, but you might shut down the servers in an hour, and then you've paid $50, but you're really like due a refund of $49 or something. And then you have to deal with this credit that sits around. The customer may not actually come back and use that credit. So it was just like, it doesn't fit the product very well. So that's kind of why we changed all that. All right. What else we got here? What do you think of a business that relies heavily on Google AdSense, which is basically like banner ads and things? Is it possible that a project that way will be profitable? DHH sharing AWS cost scares me. Well, I would think of that as two completely different types of products. Basecamp and Hey are private. You're paying a monthly fee to access that stuff, but you're uploading files and emails and other things. So they're using a lot of S3 storage and things. But if you're building a blog or something that has, or a forum that has no paid access, then like ads can be a good way of doing that and making money from it without having to charge your customers directly. You can definitely make that work. But I think from what I've seen, ads aren't going to pay a ton of money. And a lot of times you'll want to sell like ads or something directly from a sponsor like YouTube. Linus Tech Tips is a good one where they have sponsors in all of their videos and they'll mention them at the beginning and the end. And they can sell those ads for whatever they want to charge because they're built into the video and not going through Google's platform where Google's deciding how much it costs. And then the other thing is affiliate links are probably going to make you more money. So if you are able to promote some other product yourself and get a 5% of every sale or something, then those affiliate relationships go a long, long ways. And I think that's where a lot of the revenue is made from a lot of blogs and things like that have sort of a freemium or whatever. And not freemium exactly, but whatever you want to call that model, advertising model or something. So, one of my biggest worries relates to multi-tenancy implementation and resource management related to it, fluctuation of number of customers and so on. Could you say something about it? Multi-tenancy, I mean, I would use the Access Tenant Gem. I'm a maintainer of that. We use it in Jumpstart Pro. It's not enabled on anything out of the box, but it's ready for you to set on your resources. And that'll make sure that all of your queries are scoped to the tenant and everything is safe and you don't have to worry about it really, which is nice. As for fluctuation of number of customers, I'm not sure what that means exactly. So any thoughts, Colin?
No, I was kind of wondering myself. I don't really know the situation there necessarily.
Yeah. So if you want to let us know in the chat what you mean by that, we'll happily answer. Hopping over to Discord real fast. Becky asks, do you do any A/B testing? What's your favorite gem or methodology? Have you been able to successfully analyze the results? I have in the past. I don't usually. The trick with A/B testing is you just need to make sure that you have a significant test that you have enough traffic for and everything to make sure that the results are actually statistically significant. There is, I'm trying to think, A/B testing gem. I've used one in the past, and it was split. I think it even has a UI or something. Maybe I can't remember, but yeah, you can pretty much just say like, these are my A/B tests, and then it'll tell you which one it selected. So you decide what button color to render or header or something. And it's nice because you can basically do like the logic on the back end and have it split if you want to do different things. Or on the front end, like in a view, you could say, hey, render this view partial instead. So you could say, like on your homepage, render this hero section or that hero section, and just like swap out the entire partial. It's pretty great. So yeah, I mean, just the trick with A/B testing, like it's definitely very useful, but you also have to make sure you have a correct number of conversions for it to be statistically significant. Otherwise, you're still just gambling a bit and guessing that, yeah, this is better, hopefully. So, Jason asked, what Jumpstart Pro upcoming feature are you most excited for? I think the marketplace stuff is going to be super interesting. That is more and more coming up as a question people are asking about. So I really want to make sure that we support that nicely and stuff. So that is super exciting to me. Just it sort of opens up a whole fairly complicated product sector for customers to launch stuff with, because yeah, there's a lot of tricky decisions and things with marketplaces, and there's a lot of variations on marketplaces that are quite different from each other. So we're trying to support all of those and give you a good foundation with that. So I'm excited for that. Trying to think off the top of my head, I can't even think of. We've got a whole laundry list of other things we're going to work on it this year, and I'm just drawing a blank on the entire list. So I'll have to think on that.
Yeah. I was gonna say too. Somebody was talking a while back about or asking about extracting stuff into gems. I know one thing that we've talked about in the past is having features on branches that you could opt into.
Yeah.
If you wanted to. So maybe we'll do some more of that. We haven't talked about that in a while, but just to kind of like, clue everybody in on that. We've had that conversation before.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good point to mention, is like the philosophy here is that for the most part, we want Jumpstart Pro to be features that everybody, or 90% of people, 80% will use in the core template. And then for other things like Zapier support or inbound and outbound webhooks and things like that, those may or may not be used, and there's almost no reason to include that code in the template unless you're going to use that feature. So we will certainly be having like these extensions that you can add, calendars, a forum, things like that. That a forum doesn't make sense for hardly, certain products it does, but like a lot of products, Intercom doesn't have a forum. Maybe some products might have that, like DigitalOcean will have that in their community section, which makes sense for their product. But a lot of SaaSes wouldn't make sense to have a forum. So we would just have that as an optional thing you can opt into or whatever. So yeah, that's probably a hint on some of the other things that is coming. How do you price a SaaS product for businesses, especially when there's not really other comparable products? That's a great question, and I have not seen anybody do it better than Ben Orenstein with Tuple. Go see what he did when he was launching Tuple. He didn't know what to price it as, and so what he did is he made the pricing not public, and he didn't choose a price, and he just sold each customer one off. And then he was able to test different prices and do that privately. And so he was not setting any expectations. He could charge some $10 a month, he could charge others $50 a month, and he could determine, what is the right price for this. And just sort of use that, what would you call it? Like a pre launch stage, and just have that going for as long as you need to figure out your pricing. The other option you can do is just guess. If you don't have comparable competitors that have public pricing, then you'll just have to choose something. And there was an interview with Owen McCabe or somebody. I think it was him. He was talking about the initial pricing for intercom with Jason Fried, and Jason Fried was like, just do $49 a month and just start there or whatever. Because you can talk to people and they don't know why they pay for things. They don't know why it is worth X dollars, and you'll never be able to actually ask. All you can really do is throw out a number and they say yes or no, or they're on the fence. And you want to be as close to on the fence as possible, but we're
Yeah.
still getting a yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess it's
So
like similar to asking like for a salary, right? Like, here's what I would like,
yeah, yeah,
go high, uh, higher than you like really want, or are okay with, because you might get it. Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and you can always change it. It's harder to change when it's public, for everybody. You don't want to be changing it every day or something. The When it's public, that is not as easy. But um, yeah, that's what I would say. I think it's a little bit of a gamble and guesswork at the beginning, but the more people you talk to and the more you sell your product, then you start to figure that out. And you'll find some customers want or are more than happy to just offload their problems to you, and they're really happy to pay you tens of thousands of dollars or whatever. And then other customers are, we got to keep budgets tight and whatever, and they can't afford as much. And your offering will kind of depend on that too. Going monolithic sounds like a killer t-shirt idea.
I got a couple of them. I need to start some. I was just
Yeah,
thinking like,
your
'cause I
other
saw that
one
too.
is
Yeah, yeah. I gotta do that. That's gonna be my SaaS this year. Is just I'm
there
gonna
you
make a
go.
shop to sell my t-shirt ideas.
Yes. Um, App subdomains have already been a feature in Jumpstart Pro for years. Um, and basically, when you create an account, you can define a subdomain, and then we'll automatically set the current account whenever you visit that subdomain. Inertia, super cool. Definitely check it out. Um, what tools are used for managing work? GitHub, Trello, etc. We use GitHub probably 90% of the time for things, but we also use Basecamp, and that's about it, really. Basecamp's nice because Trello's cool with your cards, but like you have that in Basecamp, but you also have like the ability to upload files. Like if you need to organize your logos and other assets, you can put them in Basecamp in a location. You can create different projects for, like, we have a lot going on. We have Jumpstart, Go Rails, Hatchbox. We have courses. We have email newsletters. We have like a bunch of other things happening, and we can kind of organize them into separate projects. But we also have like company-wide stuff, which might be like healthcare announcements or 401k things or whatever that we can put in like company
Mhm.
project and stuff.
And
So
the calendar is nice too to
calendar is
have,
super
which
handy.
comes in really handy for like the weekly screencast stuff, so we can see, easily get it like look as to what's coming up, or like, oh, like, we need to fill in something for this week because we haven't done it
speaking
yet, or,
of
or something like that. Yeah,
speaking
I
of
know,
got to record something for next week.
I know.
I noticed that last night and I was like, oh, we have been because the baby was due in October, we had pre-recorded so many screencasts for the first time ever. Oftentimes I'll record screencasts like a week or two in advance at most. And we did like
We were like
8
8
weeks
weeks
or
out or
something.
something, yeah.
It was
But
amazing.
yeah, but
But
our
now,
well has run dry now.
yeah, now we're
We've
like,
gone from
oh,
cup overfloweth to well run dry.
yep. Um, get Google Education. I'm not sure what that is. We don't have anything to do with Google. GitHub Student Developer Pack does get you a year of Go Rails for free, but our courses, like the Advanced Ruby course, are separate. Mostly because they go really in depth. Like the Advanced Ruby course is over 6 hours long, maybe closer to 8 now or something. I put some bonus videos up there and stuff, and um, it just goes really, really in depth on topics and stuff, and they're harder to create and maintain and stuff. So those courses are separate, and maybe eventually we'll merge them in with the weekly screencast subscription just to consolidate things or whatever. But right now they're separate because it allows us to invest more time and stuff into them as needed. What are you hoping the Rails Foundation will add to the Rails ecosystem? You know, I hope that I hope it can help bring back the smaller regional conferences that have all dried up. It sounds like that's kind of one of the areas they want to invest in, which I think is wonderful. That is where I got started. My first, I went to Ruby Midwest in Kansas City, and back in like 2010 is my first conference ever, and it was so great. Just the small group of people, like 100 people, you go to actually meet most of those people if you want, and it's way more tight knit. You can, if somebody like Tender Love shows up, you can actually like go spend time with him a bit more than you could at RailsConf because there's not 10 times the amount of people trying to, chat with everybody. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think there's a lot of things around the Rails education, documentation, and things like that, and emphasizing those things. Hopefully, they will do more of. I feel like, again, I look to Laravel and I'm like, they're promoting Laracasts and they've got really good docs and they're updating those all the time, and they're actually officially trying to support payments and other things that really like fit the community. So we've been trying to do that here at Go Rails and try and make the PayGem so it's easy to do payments now in Rails, and we take care of all the webhooks and stuff for you. And that's like, if Rails started as an entrepreneurial framework, then how do we keep that going? And I'd really like to see the Rails Foundation emphasize that stuff some more. Greetings from Brazil. Hello. I would love to make it to Brazil sometime. Rails and Vue.js. I feel like Rails and React is unfortunately way more popular because I really like Vue and I would love to see more of that. Also love Hotwire, but if I had to choose one of the frameworks, front end frameworks, like Vue is, I love Vue. Yeah, if you're building a single tenant app, that's a-okay. That's what most of a lot of people are using it for that, which is great. So you maybe not take advantage of some of the account features or access tenant or whatever, but if you need any of those features, the other features that we have built in, then like it's still going to save you a ton of time. Like I happily use it for launching any other projects and stuff just because it's all ready to go. And one of the nice things too is we maintain it so that it's always on the latest Rails version. We're fixing new things. When Ruby 3.2 comes out, Christmas Day, I was actually upgrading Jumpstart to test it with Ruby 3.2, figuring out that like Nokogiri doesn't have a pre-built version yet and so on. So we're like actively maintaining this stuff for you. So if you use Jumpstart for any project, those things you don't have to worry about. When Rails 7.1 or Rails 8 comes out, we're going to do the upgrade for you, and you can just merge it in, and you don't have to learn about all those nuances to upgrading stuff, or if a gem goes out of date or whatever. We try and make that stuff easier for you. So that's like, a big benefit there. How many people behind GoRails? Well, you're looking at it. Aside from the accountant and the lawyer and HR consultants and stuff like that, this is us. Like to use Rails for API only. I want to create an API engine modularized. Do you have a recommendation about pros and cons about it? By the way, I'm from Costa Rica. Awesome. Yeah, I think, the API engines, I assume you just use Railties for that. Maybe you do still want to use an engine. I guess you would still use an engine so you could have the app controllers folder automatically loaded. And then, if you had JBuilder views or something for rendering JSON. But yeah, I don't think there's anything special about API only ones. Just make sure you're only using the API only features, and I think you're good to go. What were the reasons you chose YouTube? We didn't know how many people were going to show up, so there's been like 50 to 60, maybe close to 70 people here. We were going to use Zoom so that you could ask questions and stuff on video, but since we didn't know how many people there were going to be, we just streamed it on YouTube instead. That way we can support as many people as possible. That's it. Oh yeah. Julian was talking about using the Flipper gem by John Nunemaker. He's awesome. He also wrote HDD Party and Flipper, similar to A/B tests. If you want to do feature flags and turn on features for different people, nothing better than Flipper, I don't think, right now. And it probably will stay that way. He does a great job on maintaining that and stuff. So yeah, I love using that. And there's also, I was telling Colin this the other day, like the scientist gem from GitHub, which is more sort of for refactoring, which sometimes you could use feature flags for. But what's cool about it is it will run both copies of your code and then compare the results. And you would do this in production if you're changing, for example, if you're migrating payment systems like we just did on GoRails, you could have the old logic and the new logic and compare the results and make sure they were the same before you pushed it out to 100% of people, which is super cool. So it's kind of a similar thing to feature flags.
And maybe something we should have done. We should have tried that out, maybe.
Yeah, we found a couple little logic bugs that, you live and learn.
It happens. It happens to us all.
Jason says, make sure that you're selling at a high enough price that it justifies to the effort you have to put into selling. That's very, very smart. Yeah. If you are, that I think that was one of the things that when I was going back to the co-founder question, when I was starting, the idea of having one or two co-founders, meaning we'd have the revenue that we made or the profit we made, I would have 100% of it or 50% or a third of it, depending on how many co-founders I had, just made it seem twice as hard or more. And I was like, if I do this by myself, at least every dollar that I make, I can actually use to pay rent and eat and live. And it made it seem to me a lot more possible to go start my business and then live on it, and make that my living without having to supplement with contract work or something else like a job. So yeah, I think that is really good. So if you're going to give out affiliate commissions, sales commissions, stuff like that. You want to make sure that it's at a high enough price point. And then just do the math too. Like if you're trying to make $5,000 a month and you're selling a $20 a month product, you're going to need a heck of a lot of customers after taxes as well. Think about that too. And it really depends how many people want that product right away. Like Go Rails has, it's not a need for most people. You maybe have a project and you need help from one of the videos, but education stuff is kind of like a want for most people. They want to learn Rails. Um, and it's not like, oh, I need toilet paper. You know, there's no alternative for that stuff, where there is, but we don't want to think about it. And you know, it's one of those things that you have to think about. What's the volume people will want this for? How important is it? Um, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but ideally, you find something that's, you know, urgent or important, required even. Um, for example, this is one of the things I've thought about with Go Rails. So with video education, if you learn something, and we kind of have two types of customers I think I've figured out. We have people who are like need to see a specific video and they sign up and cancel that same month. There are other people who want to continue learning over time and keep an eye on the videos, and they subscribe for a long time because they want to stay up to date with Hotwire and Rails 7.1 and whatever it is that's new and coming out, or they want to use the videos as a reference to think about how would I go approach these problems and see what I can learn from how they approach the problems and how I might do it differently and whatever. Um, but in general, it's education. So if you are in a pinch that month, you're going to cut Go Rails and cancel it. And we're going to be a business that has generally higher churn. You'll probably keep your Netflix account more than you would for Go Rails if it came down to it, right? But when we got into the next product, Hatchbox, if you deploy your Rails app with Hatchbox and it's live in production, you're probably not going to want to cancel that, because if you do, it's going to be much harder to migrate your site to another hosting service or maintain your own server or whatever. So it's much less churn. And yet, on the other hand, Go Rails isn't critical. So if we go down for an hour for maintenance or something, whatever, not a big deal. You watch the video in an hour. But if Hatchbox goes down and you can't deploy that code that you need to go up to production, that's very bad. So we have like a much more urgent, critical product. But the benefit is that it's lower churn. So, you know, everything has trade-offs. Then Jumpstart's another version of that, excuse me, where it is maybe not one that's, you know, if you were branching away from you know, the new features that we're going to add, and you don't need, and you're happy to maintain the app you've got, maybe you don't stick around for a subscription on there. But it also is not urgent, and it's also something that's not very hard for us to maintain. So it's not like we're having to put out new content every single week like we do with the Go Rails subscription. We could pause Jumpstart Pro for a month and not touch it, and that would be fine, because not a whole lot changes in Ruby gems and Rails in a month. Rails doesn't get a new release for a couple years on average or something. So it's much lower urgency, but it's also got its pros and cons too. And whenever I hear somebody talking about their product, I always think about those things. Like, how important is this? Will their customers sort of be required to continue using this? If you're using Intercom, you can't really cancel Intercom, or otherwise you have to find an alternative way of talking to your customers. And you can't just go to email unless you have a shared inbox. And then you've got to have all your team logging into this one shared inbox, or you got to pay for a tool to do that. And so, you know, those are really valuable. Those are also ones directly helping the customer, or their customer, which are businesses, talk to their customers, which is more valuable than selling something to consumers. So if you can do a B2B product, you can charge a lot more, and it'll be a lot more valuable there too. So it is a lot of different things to consider. And when you're starting out, the only thing you care about is how to make enough money to pay my rent and pay for food and whatever bills I got. So you don't probably emphasize those as much, but if you can think about them when you're making those product decisions, I think it can set you in a much better trajectory. Like a lot of the indie hackers I see building in public on Twitter and indie hackers, a lot of them are really products that aren't important. So people churn easily. They're not worth a lot of money. It might be $10 a month or something. Even then, it might be not worth $10. And so it's important to think about how can I make something that's critical enough for a company to use, but also doesn't require 9 years of development or funding to go build something really complicated like building render or fly.io. Huge expense, huge amount of knowledge needed to do that. So you can't do that as an indie hacker or small business without funding. But you also can probably find some nice middle ground products that are out there. So we're actually about to update our deploy with Rails guide, and then DHH has also been working on MRSK, a little like Docker deployment tool that you can check out. The Rails guides, I think, are pretty functional, but there's a couple little bugs in it now. Passenger changed, Linux changes, all kinds of things change. But for the most part, everything's there in concept, so you can read through the deploy guide on Go Rails, which is effectively set up a user that runs all your code, install Nginx to serve HTTP requests and files like assets. Then you install like Passenger or set up Puma to run. So Nginx can send the requests to Rails, sends the request back to Nginx, back to your customer or the viewer, and you install your database, and that's about it. So there's not a ton to it. We're also going to upgrade that whole guide to use Caddy instead, which is like an alternative for Nginx. And what's cool about it is it will do SSL certificates through Let's Encrypt automatically, which is sweet. So all of that SSL wrangling is done for you, which for the new Hatchbox, when we moved to that, it solved a whole swath of issues. Renewing certificates and everything is just magic now. So yeah. Biggest mistake, regret, from something you've done on Jumpstart. Oh, I think probably what I would say on that one is some of the early versions of Pay, I tried to be a little bit too simple, and that made migrations pretty tough for early customers who had to migrate from one or two tables for subscriptions and stuff. And I guess a whole aspect of that was I wrote code for payments, assuming like you're going to have one payment method on file and one subscription. But as we know, in most programming things, if you assume there will only ever be one of this thing, the second you need two or more of them, everything goes out the window and you've got to like do a heck of a refactoring. So that was like a giant pain to refactor that code. And then I'm writing code that all these other people are using and they need to be able to upgrade smoothly and not lose any data and things like that. So it was definitely a struggle on a couple of those early ones that, you make the decision to try and keep it simple, which is good in theory and well-intentioned, but the complexity that you actually need to support in the long run, it would have been better just to start out with it being a bit more complex. So I'm looking at offering some embedded app for two platforms, same embedded app. They'll have some, okay. They'll have some differences in the foundations, logins, billing flow, etc., but the main app will be the same. Really good, interesting problem.
He has
Potentially what you could do.
a follow up to kind of
Oh, cool.
about that, like two
Here we
comments
go.
maybe.
Would you suggest trying to build the main functionality as a Rails gem, then have two code bases which require it? Trying to have the same code base with two different branches. Ooh, if you're sharing stuff, it's really nice to have it in a gem, because then you can update that. Um, I'm trying to decide whether, and you didn't ask this, but depending on the problem, you might actually want to build it into the same app. Um, so if you can have your one app that you maintain and you don't have to have a gem and you don't have to have two apps with the same gem and keeping all of that in sync, because if you change the gem, you need to synchronize the deployments and updates to the application as well. That gets really complicated. So if you could actually build it as a single app with all of that logic shared inside of, you could still put it in a Rails engine inside of that repo, and separate all that code out that's shared. But then you could have potentially the Rails app with separate routes and things for each of those platforms. So you could maybe have like, let's imagine you're doing something with e-commerce integrations and you have Shopify and WooCommerce and maybe some other e-commerce things that you integrate with. You could namespace those routes and controllers and even any specific models to those, and then run it in a single Rails app. You have one thing to maintain now, and it would be much easier to orchestrate the maintenance of all those things. So that's something to consider. I would try to do that if you could, because it'll probably save you a heck of a lot of time. Right now, for example, we're doing effectively that with the PayGem, and that now powers Go Rails payments, Hatchbox payments, and Jumpstart payments. And we have to update pay for some feature we need in one of the apps and orchestrate that update, because you might need a new migration or a new method call or something. So you update pay, you release the new version of the gem, then you update Go Rails to use that after you've released it. You might discover a bug, you got to go release a new version of pay for that. And then finally, you can deploy the one app. Then you got to go to your other two apps and then do the same process on those. And you don't want to accidentally update those apps to use the new version of the code yet, unless it's ready to. And so you have to be very careful about that orchestration, basically. So if you could keep it all together, then your pull request might change it for everything in one PR instead of having to do it across 2, 3, 4 different repos, which is just harder to maintain. So jumping back to the number of customers, I was thinking about the challenges regarding the resources needed to start, server capacity, et cetera, and how to plan it as customers may come and go. I think you're just going to need to pick a server size and monitor it for usage. So like Go Rails, I don't remember how many requests. It's like several million page views a year for Go Rails, and we can run on like a 2 gigabyte server, because it's not doing anything crazy. It's rendering videos and forum pages, and that's about it. So it depends on what your app does. If there's lots of background workers or heavy IO or whatever, then sure, you might need more. But you're going to start out with 0 customers or 0 users, and then you're going to be adding some slowly at the beginning, most likely. Maybe you're going to go crazy, and then great, good for you, good problem to have. And you could start with just a bigger server or something. But honestly, I bet most of the time it's going to be a slow thing at the beginning. You just monitor the server, see what the server RAM and CPU usage is and disk space, and you just keep an eye on it every week, see how if it changed at all, and see how it goes, and then add more capacity as needed. I think a lot of people over provision and pay way too much for stuff they don't need, and just kind of wasted money there, which is important when you are starting your business. um, yes. That's hilarious. Um, Speaking of Venmo, I was fixing the CI test for pay last night, and Venmo payments through Braintree were actually one of the failing tests. I was like, I swear I was just thinking about Venmo. So, yes. Can you make a screencast and multi-tenant application based on subdomains with Caddy Auto SSL? There's really nothing to that. If you have a subdomain and you want all of those to support SSL, you just tell Caddy that you want to use the wildcard certificate, so *example.com, and then that will require you to like use the API keys to DigitalOcean, Cloudflare, wherever your DNS is, and it will register a certificate for every subdomain and use that for every subdomain, and that's it, and you're done. You have SSL support for all of them. That's it. If you want that taken care of for you, Hatchbox will do it, and you just plug in your API keys, and the next request, it'll restart Caddy, register that SSL cert, and you're good to go. So it's nice and easy. I've built a product using Rails and React for an online appointment booking system. That's cool. Will Jumpstart Pro considerably enhance my app? No, I doubt it. Because if you're in React, we use Hotwire for all of the front end in Jumpstart Pro, which would probably conflict with all of the front end UI that you've already built, which you'd have to redo or figure out how to make Hotwire compatible, which is probably not worth the effort. And I would just keep going as you want. But that said, if there are any backend things that you would like accounts or payments or something like that, then you could take a look if you wanted to. A lot of customers of Jumpstart actually buy it just to read the code and see how professional Rails app would be built and designed and tested and things, and they use it like as a learning tool or a reference. That might be useful, but that's up to you to decide on if that is the case. So yeah. Well, I think we've been on here for about an hour and 40 minutes already, so this is really fun. We were just kind of shooting some ideas around recently, and like I think this turned out great, and we should make this a regular thing, and then in the future maybe we'll have very maybe some more technical specific things like, hey, I want to go build this specific feature, or maybe you guys want to see us build a product on, or build multi-tenancy or checkout or something with Jumpstart on the next live stream or something. So let us know, and we will be happy to do these again in the future. Maybe we'll do them twice a month to start out, or once a month, and go from there. And if we've got a lot of questions and things every month or every week, then maybe we'll do it on a weekly basis. But yeah, let us know. We've had a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah, good time. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, it is. There's a good turnout, so I'm excited. But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up here. Sound good?
Yeah, thank y'all. Thanks everybody for stopping in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. This was blast. Oh, one last question squeezed in. I'll have a lot of plain JavaScript for several components. How hard will it be to pass my JavaScript to Hotwire? Shall I do it before or after I complete my project? Honestly, a lot of the plain JavaScript stuff will work, but the only thing you need to think about with it is the initialization stuff for the most part. So if you are listening to DOM content loaded, event to initialize your JavaScript, you will want to change that to use the turbo load event instead, so that it is compatible with Hotwire. And that's like the equivalent of a new page view event. The other alternative is, if they're not too hard to migrate, you could just migrate those over to stimulus components, which automatically will register on page load, but also when they're removed from the page, you can tear them down. And whenever they're added to the page at any time, you can have them be reset up. So stimulus components are killer for that sort of stuff. But for the most part, yeah, that's all you really need to do. For example, if you want to add Bootstrap JavaScript to Hotwire, you will listen to the turbo load event. You will install the dropdown, the tooltips, the modals, whatever other JavaScript you want, and that will initialize it for the page. And then I think that's generally about it, because it will keep it for the other page views. But if you do need to tear it down before the next page loads, you can listen to another event, tear it down, disable the JavaScript, and undo it. Like Tom select or select ties or select to, those like fancy JavaScript select boxes, you might want to tear those down before the page gets cached. And you can do that and then reinitialize them on the next page view. And that's it. So it's very simple in theory, but it depends on how your components work and stuff. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. We'll do this again very soon. I'll keep an eye out, and probably will join our Discord, links in the description, if you want to get notified of other of these, or just talk to other, Go Rails community members and chat about Rails and products and business and Ruby and those fun things. And I'm sure we'll send out another notification about the next one and an email as well. So we'll see you all then.
Take care.
Later.